Meet Selena. It's early morning and she sits on her porch, cradling a steaming cup of coffee. The sky is painted a beautiful array of blues, oranges, and pinks, but she barely notices. Her eyes follow the swirl of steam, but her mind is elsewhere, circling around work, the tensions within her team, and the changes she knows she needs to make but feels clueless about where to start. Her puppy, Luna, tugs at her pajama pants, growling playfully, but she's too distracted to respond. A moment later, her wife Allison walks outside and takes in the sight of her. "You're thinking about work again, aren't you?" she says as she sits next to Selena. Selena exhales, shaking her head. "It's just, I see the gaps in trust. I know that they're not collaborating, and I know what needs to change, but I don't know how to get them on board." She rubs her temple. "It's like I'm waiting for someone to give me permission when I'm the one in charge." Allison gives her a knowing look. "Sweetheart, how can you expect them to trust you when you don't trust yourself?" Selena leans back in her chair, the words settling in. She's always been confident in theory, but in practice, she second guesses herself. She sees other HR leaders on LinkedIn and wonders if she measures up. She has great ideas, ways to foster inclusion, make people feel more connected at work, and to make her nonprofit a place where people really want to stay. But every time she drafts an email or prepares a proposal, doubt creeps in. She sees the way some employees hesitate before speaking in meetings. She sees the way teams are operating in silos rather than collaborating. She hears leaders talk about culture, but fail to take real action. She knows this can't continue, but she wonders, who am I to fix this? The coffee in her mug has gone cold. Selena sighs. "I just need to stop overthinking." "No," Allison corrects. "You need to start believing." Today, I meet with Kenston Henderson Sr, cultural transformation expert, TEDx speaker, and leadership coach who helps HR and business leaders create workplace cultures where trust, inclusion, and resilience thrive. Kenston specializes in helping leaders like Selena step into their power, communicate with confidence, and create workplace culture changes that actually stick. And I'm excited to hear how Kenston would advise Selena on how to overcome imposter syndrome, build trust within her team, and to step up as a leader, not just by title, but by presence. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Kenston, we're going to dive into Selena's story here in a bit, but I want to talk a bit about your story. You've had this incredible background in HR over 20 years, and you decided to become a professional speaker and talk about the things that were important to you around creating healthy, inclusive workplaces. And I always like to hear the story of what led to that. Was there something that happened? Was there a moment that came to you where you're like, you know what, this is what I really want to do, and this is the impact I want to make?
Yeah, it was a wild moment that happened for me. I had graduated from with a degree in corporate education and training, or adult learning, corporate training at the end of the day. And so had been in my career for at that time 13 years, and I wasn't in the space of what I went to school for. And so one of those classic stories of not so much doing what you thought you was going to school for, and it didn't happen for 13 years. And so I found myself, I felt like I was hitting my head against the wall, multiple days. when I was doing, benefits administration to recruitment to HRIS, those other areas of HR, but not in the training and development space. And so I got to a point where I said, well, if I don't make a move or take an action, intentional steps towards training and development, then I am going to be stuck in this type of in this part of HR where I do not desire to be. And um, so I took drastic actions, and I started a business, or I started working towards starting a business. And so I got into a leadership program, and then I got another mentor, started networking, and I started really taking action on to, because I said I have to get into a role that was in training and development. And it's so funny that every role that I've been into in those first 13 years, I found myself in some type of aspect of educating or inspiring and equipping people. And those are the times when it came alive, right? And so when I had a stint with Ohio State, I was, a part of this 2-day retreat called Cultural Transformation. And um, it had such a profound impact on me. I was like, I know I'm supposed to be here. Like, I know I'm supposed to be here. And it's not me just telling myself I'm supposed to be here, but everybody else around me was like, Kenston, like, this is a whole nother side I've seen of you. And I'm like, I don't know what happened. It just, I'm the same person. But it's just something about when I get to equip people and I get to see that light bulb moments come out, that it comes alive. And so, 13 years, I said, you know what? It's time to make that decision. And so, um, I started a business in 2016, and it was around my love and passion for equipping people, and that was the training and development side. But then I was like, well, my mom and dad were inspirational speakers as far as preachers and teachers. So I said, well, let's add that because that's in my tool belt, and let's combine all my experience and talents in those areas. And so that's how it came to be. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that was a defining moment where I was like, "No, I can't do this another year," and I took action.
Because you felt like you were out of alignment,
Yeah.
and right, and then you had these moments where you did do a little bit of that training
Mhm.
and you felt alive.
That's a lie.
Right, and then you also had that feedback from others. I think that's so valuable, right, Kenston? It's like someone keeps telling you, "Hey, I saw you do this. I can see it in you. You are lighting up," and it gives you that all the evidence you need to pursue it.
Yeah. It was like the last one was when I was doing a benefits presentation. I don't know if you've ever sat through a benefits presentation session before, like at new hire orientation. And someone came up to me and was like, Kinston, how in the world did you make me like benefits, or how did you make me learn about this? Like, this doesn't usually happen. And I was just like, I don't know. I just, like, I have to make trainings and speaking engagements fun for myself too,
Yeah,
engaging, and to create a really well-rounded learning experience. So if I'm
yeah.
bored, yeah, that's not gonna work out.
Right, right. Well, that's a wonderful way to put it. Anybody who does have that opportunity to do some public speaking, whether that's in corporate or you have a business of your own, you have to enjoy it. You have to have the fun, right? And then the energy gets felt by the audience. Now, there were so many different things it sounds like you could have really focused on, Kenston. I mean, you have this variety of background and that a lot of experience you could have done, but you clearly care about creating healthy and inclusive work environments. Why did you choose that? Why is that your focus?
Yeah, I mean, so my foundation is leadership, and so leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. That's a John Maxwell quote. But I love leadership. I love being able to equip leaders with the necessary tools to be successful. And so I understand that leaders, in order for a thriving, healthy, thriving, belonging workplace culture to take place, it all starts with leadership first and foremost. And so if leadership is open to continuous growth and development, they're going to by product create and cultivate a healthy, thriving, inclusive, belonging workplace culture. But it all starts with the leader,
Mhm.
and the leader could sometimes be yourself. So self leadership. So being able to lead yourself effectively creates that environment. But then when you have the opportunity to serve others in a way of leadership, now that opens it up even more, your area of influence and your level of influence, where people are going to engage differently. They're going to engage respectfully. They're going to engage with thought and care in mind, so that they can um, do what they need to do, and everyone's successful. So yeah.
Well, it's a way to scale up the impact when you work directly with leaders. And I do think that one of the problems I see in workplace culture so often, Kenston, is that leaders are put into leadership positions but never given any manual of how to be a leader. Like, in other words,
Uh-oh.
right? But you see this, right? You see
Oh,
people who
yes.
are high performers in their one role, and they can
Yes.
be the best at it, yet that
Yes.
does not translate to great leadership.
Mm. You can have said that even better. Like any better, because that's what is often happening, especially in I've seen it a lot in the manufacturing industry,
Mm.
where they don't get any training at all. And I was recently with a group, and they had not experienced any type of that type of leadership management training. And so people were being put in positions that had no training, and so it was difficult for them, as it should be. But um, because people don't understand that you actually got to actually like people to lead them well, or to manage them well. If you desire to manage them well, I think, gotta kind of like them.
Well, you know what? It's funny you say that. One of the best leaders I've ever encountered, he was someone I worked with at Tesla, and he had just such a good reputation. There's He said it to me a number of times, and he means it when he says it. He goes, "Jay, I love people." Like, he really does. Like, he genuinely, from his heart, he loves people. And because of that, he's such a natural leader. It's not like he doesn't even need that kind of training because of the way he loves it, right? Others, Eric, it requires a bit of upskilling and being able to
Oh
shift
yeah,
perspective, right? Because so often we're like, okay, I have to perform for me, I have to perform for me, I have to perform for me, and that's a good thing, right? You know how to do that.
yeah.
But when it comes to leading others, it's completely different. It's a different game. Now,
Mhm.
that's actually a word that you use quite often, a game changer, right? You use that word
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
a
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
Yeah. Tell me about like the origin of that word and how you use it.
Listen, it's just, I mean, man, where did that start from? My goodness. I don't know. I think it's always been in my vocabulary, but I really started honing in on it and start gifting it to people, because I realized that once people get this game changer mindset, and so just for those who are listening, the definition of it is someone who significantly impacts a situation or circumstance and raises the level of skill and awareness in the people around them. It's like it's being a difference maker. It's really resilient, being willing to rise to the occasion when you're met with pressure, or when you're met with any obstacles, looking at obstacles as a opportunity, looking at a crisis as an opportunity. And if leaders can get that, and if team members can get that, then their workplace is going to be, again, adding to the creating, cultivating a healthy, thriving, belonging workforce culture.
Yeah,
And
and
so that's what
you
I live
said it.
by.
You said it earlier, Kinston, which is like leaders have to be open to this first. You said it
Yeah,
like,
that part.
that's the first thing. If they're open. Now,
If they're
right, if they're open, because otherwise, we can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. But let's assume, right, someone's open, like someone like Selena, right, where she's
Yeah,
clearly open to this, but when she's facing this high demand, when she's facing this stress, she finds it difficult, and she maybe stays within her own mind, doesn't take the action she needs to take. And so, how does someone cultivate that resilience within them, Kenston? Like, what does someone do to be able to deal with the complexity, the conflicts, the difficulty, be able to overcome it so they can serve their people?
yeah. I mean, I would simply, and this is the coach, the leadership coach in me, and it's really, asking them the questions, and I would start, with Selena. I'd be like, hey, you know what, Selena, what were some past wins that you had as a leader, right? Calling back into remembrance the things that they already went through, that they've already achieved, already fought through or broke through, to help them continue to lead well. right? And so calling them their remembrance into that, that's a good thing. And then it allows them to build on that momentum that they once had. And so many times leaders, they forget about the things that they've done really well. And so even for me, I have a gratitude jar. And so things that full of wins. And so I can go to this jar and I can pick something out and then remember like, oh snap. Oh yeah, that was a game changer right there, right? And it encourages me so that way I can move on to what I need to move on to. And so that's the same thing Selena could do very easily. But again, it's being very intentional for moments that I haven't, for new moments that may occur as a leader. You got to remember some of those past wins that will help you keep going.
Yeah, because the problem is that the mind wants to always focus on all the things you're not doing well. That's how the mind's wired to be. It's let's focus on my weaknesses, where I messed up, what I'm not doing. And what you're saying, Kenston, and I appreciate the word intentional, it is to be intentional about bringing to mind the success that you have had and the achievement you've already established so that you convince your own subconscious mind that
Yeah,
you can do it. It's within
yeah,
you and you have the faculty, and that will allow for you to at least make that incremental progress towards taking the action that scares you. Is that
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's right. And because here's the thing, that's when if you don't do it, then that's when imposter syndrome can creep into it, right? When you
Yeah.
don't remind yourself of some of the things that you've already achieved, that's when imposter syndrome says, you know what? Are you sure you can fix this? Are you sure you can really take that chance, that risk? Um, but then you got to turn around with the mindset that even in the game changer is, but if not me, then who? Who will do this? Who will fix this? Who will go into action or who will take action on this?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And I think there's something that opens up in us when we take that first action, or even if we see somebody else take that first action. There's a very famous story of the 4 minute mile. And
yeah,
so it was something that was considered impossible, that no one
yeah,
can run a mile in 4 minutes. Okay. And
yeah.
so no one got close. Now, Kenston, the first person who did the 4 minute mile, within the next few months, there were like dozens more people
Mhm,
that did the 4 minute
mhm,
mile because
mhm.
we saw, oh, wow, it was
That's
possible.
good.
All
That's
right.
good.
Someone could do it. And so sometimes we can even evoke that in somebody else, right? To be able to say, hey, here's another leader that is doing it. And if they can do it, then I can.
Yeah, yeah. It's see, and that's the power of community, right? That is sure enough the power of community. And so um who do you have around you, right? That's another game changer. Tip is having the right people around you, or again, surrounding yourself intentionally. Because again, if you're not surrounded by anybody, period, then you're siloed. And so, but having someone uh, like yourself around you, someone like me who thinks differently, who's gone through different experiences, to be able to run something by them, right? I've always tell people to, role play with whoever you can, even if
Yeah.
it's with your dog, role play, but get it out.
Right.
But really just run those ideas past people to get their take on and see what they've done before. But I'm so big on mentorship and coaching, and because those are two, I would say, two people that you definitely need to have as you continue to grow as a leader. So,
I agree with you 100%. I think that it doesn't matter what level of where you
yep,
are in your career, doesn't matter what you've achieved. The best performing athletes in the world have coaches for a reason. They
yep.
don't stop learning because they
Yeah,
know that there is no end to learning. There is no end
absolutely.
to growth. And so we see, Kenston, so many of the issues that have been prevalent in the workplace are still an issue, and you highlight some of it on your website. You talk about how we have a lack of engagement, employee turnover, toxic environments, low morale. uh, what's the real core issue that we like? It's 2025. Why haven't we fixed this yet?
People, people unwilling to grow and
Mm,
develop, to become the best version of themselves, people who are burnt out from trying to be the best leader as well. I've
Yeah.
seen that in different cases where the culture is not conducive to learning and development. The culture eats, I say culture eats everything, every type of initiative, every type of growth strategy, every type of anything that says um, development, it eats it up. And so you're essentially fighting against culture. And so who's ever leading in that culture, if they don't have a care bone in their body that says, I want to develop my people to to be successful. Because if a company is, they're meeting their bottom line, they're selling, they're saying, Kenston, why do we need management training? Why do we need leadership training? Why do we need inclusive leadership? Why do we need to learn strength finders and Myers Briggs and all these assessments? We don't need to take these assessments. They just need to do their work. That's a toxic workplace in the making. And so you'll have high turnover where you find that. You'll have a lot of disgruntled people that are just going into work, keeping their head down, just to get their paycheck and not ruffle any feathers because of that toxic workplace environment. And so why it happens is because there's not a strong, it's not on the high list for whoever that leader is or leaders are. Because I know some very some leaders in the Sweet Sea area, they love and they know the value of training development, but that's not cascaded down into middle management. And so if middle management doesn't believe that uh, development work is important, then it gets lost in the sauce. And then that's where you see a lot of help that's needed, a lot of toxicity that's in the workplace. And so, yeah,
So what you're saying is that it, of course, it comes from the top, right? Whatever the lead, the CEO and the executive team, what they prioritize will be then what trickles down to the rest of the organization. I agree wholeheartedly, but I like that second part too, which is there has to also be communication that goes between, like, from the C suite down, that ensures that all leaders are aligned with those initiatives, that all of them are really on board with development and the things that we're discussing here. So someone like Selena, right? She of course cares for these things. She wants more collaboration amongst her team. She wants more inclusion. But let's say she meets resistance from within the organization. How does she
mm,
work through it? How do you deal with the fact that there may be people who don't prioritize it? She's a leader, right? She's in those
yeah,
rooms. How can she
yeah.
either convince them or how can she help them to recognize the value in it?
I mean, I'm big on don't tell me, show me. and
Mm,
and so it's by her developing herself as a leader, that's when she's engaging in conversations that she's going to level up in those conversations, or she's going to have some think of some really thought-provoking questions inside those meetings,
yeah.
to really get people to think. Imagine that, but get people to really think and be thoughtful in their responses, and just to see, like, for example, as we create, cultures of belonging, are you truly getting, are you truly adding value to the people who don't so much speak up during meetings? So that's one of my things, because we have this argument in the workplace of, bosses like extroverts more than they like introverts, or the person who speaks up more, they get more attention. Are you aware of who you're giving attention to? But that only comes by having some level of accountability. Actually, you're asking someone to watch you while you're in the meeting to see who do you respond to most. Because just those little bit of adjustments can make the difference in having a very collaborative, conversations, and even among leaders themselves, are they aware of that? But I really just believe that, going back to how she can help others and help other leaders desire that, is if she comes in with new information and then actually implements that information, and then they'll want to know, how did she get the response that she got um, from a certain employee group than they did. right? One of the groups I lead um, a group of leaders at my church, and there was a former one of the new leaders. They were leading a group, and it was successful and going well. And they came back. They said they got a call from the former leader of that group, and they said, "How did you get such and such to do this? How did you get them to do that?" Um, I don't know. I just built relationship. And so there's a relationship factor on how to impact other people. And so, um, yeah, so I would tell her.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta first do the work within yourself, and
Hmm.
then when you implement it, really get the results, and then
Yeah,
you can share those results because you can't argue with results. You can't
you
argue with
can,
evidence, right?
you can.
Theory is one thing, and you can have an opinion on things, but when you actually show, "Hey, here's where they were, here's where they are now,
Yeah,
here's the case study, the testimonial from the person who went through this.
yeah,
Let's look at how we can implement this on a larger scale." You said something that got me curious just now. You said, the leader who would be in that meeting and essentially have bias, right? They would have bias towards the more extroverted person, or there's someone that they're ignoring and they're really focusing on others. And so, how do you help someone through that? I mean, yes, I think having the awareness is one, but I do think at times, Kenston, these are things that are happening subconsciously. The person's probably not doesn't mean it, but they have a bias within themselves, right? How do you help people to work through the bias?
yeah, absolutely. So I had that situation myself, and where the leader kept asking me questions, kept asking me my feedback, my responses, my creative, innovative ideas. So one time I said, they asked a general question out to everyone that's sitting around the table. And let's just say for our purposes, Sue spoke up and said, "Hey, I think this will be a good idea to do it this way, this process, and then approved by 25%, and they'd be great." They said, "Okay, well, Kirsten, what do you think about it?" And I said the exact same thing that that person said, the exact same thing. And they said, "Kirsten, that's a great idea. We should implement that tomorrow." I'm like, "Whoa, what
Wow.
just happened?" And so we had to have that necessary conversation
Yeah.
about how they were showing up. And you know like you said, no negative intent, but now that they were made aware, I said, "Hey, I said the same exact thing that they did." And I waited till after the meeting was over
Yeah, you
with.
did that privately.
And because there's a difference, right? Defense systems go up when you do it out in the open. The culture wasn't a healthy culture that would allow that to take place, because some cultures I would have been able to address that. But again, knowing the culture I was in, that wasn't the first right move to make. And so making the right move would be to that I did was after the meeting was over with, and had that conversation. Just let
Yeah.
them know, like, look, I don't know if you know or aware of, but you're only calling on me or the other guys in the room, and you're not paying attention to the women. And they was like, "Ooh, that's a problem." I said, "You got it. I didn't know." And they say, "I didn't know I was doing that, but thank you for helping make me aware." And so then on, again, easy conversation,
Yeah. Did
defense
that did
system
that
went
leader
down.
start to change their
Oh,
behavior? Did you
yes,
see? Yeah?
absolutely.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Right? But again, but for so long, because again, how biases are formed over life experiences, um, men were usually the leader one, and then the men colleagues were the ones that got the most attention, or were their ear was open to more men. And so it makes sense along their career. And so they just had to become aware of it. And when they became aware of it, they said, "Great." And even it happened again. So it happened again. But this time, when I had the conversation with them, they said, "You know what? I knew it. I missed it." And I said, "Okay. So next time you just gotta say something in a moment.
Mm.
Just
Just
a little
call it out.
nudge.
Yeah.
Call it forward. Like, I'm sorry." Right? Because again, a bias, if you want to, is almost like a habit. If you want to erase a bad habit, it's gonna take some time, it's gonna take some intentionality, but you gotta do the work.
Yeah. Well, I think in both cases, for you and for this other leader, there was courage. I'm hearing courage, right? Courage for you, right? It took courage to have to call that out directly to this person, because that's not a comfortable conversation to have, but you did it because you recognize the value in doing it. Now, the other leader, I want to give them some acknowledgement too, because that person had the courage to say, you know what, you're right, to
Yeah,
not get defensive,
to
to
not get
not
this. Yeah,
right, not take it personally.
yeah, that's a solid leader,
Yeah,
and that's how you know what type of leader you're dealing with.
right, right.
Like I
It,
know this leader, and that's I tell people know you are, who your leader is. Like know that, know who your manager is, and how they like to receive information. What do they like to see, or how did they like to be confronted? And that's it. And even in the interview process, those who are interviewing, like ask that leader, hey, if I'm not in agreement with something that you said or that you've done, how would you like for me to bring you that information?
yeah. Yeah. Well, it reminds me so much. I learned this years ago. I want to share it with you. I want to get your thoughts. We all, of course, know the golden rule, right? The golden rule is to treat others how you want to be treated. And years ago, a mentor shared it with me. He's like, "You know what's even better, Jay?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "The platinum rule." I said, "What's the platinum rule?" He goes, "The platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated."
Mhm. That's it. That's the
Yeah.
platinum,
Yeah. But you
and
have to
that's
understand, right? You have to you have to first seek to understand the
what?
leader.
No, no, you can't do that. That's too much. Like right,
Right. Instead, just tell everybody your ideas and don't listen to anybody else. But
or
it's really like all we're talking about here. It's like the simplest things, which is to humble yourself, to really humble yourself, to be humble and to have enough self awareness to say, you know what? I don't have it all figured out. I want to learn, and I'll have the courage to be able to receive the feedback and make the changes within myself. That's the kind of leader that we are always inspired by, and the kind of leader that we would always like to be
Mm,
like.
yeah. See that just makes me think that we have to give leaders, those who are in management positions or leadership positions, we have to give them an opportunity to say, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to have it right every time. Like, and so those who are watching and hearing this is, forgive yourself. Like, give yourself grace, to know that you don't have to have it all together and all mapped out and, in a bow. You don't have to, but um, there's strength, and that's why if you're on a team, there's strength in a team and not just yourself. So
Right, right. And I think there's a component of establishing, cultivating that sense of safety within yourself, the way you were describing, right? And the term psychological safety is floating around a lot these days. And then, of course, as a leader, to be able to create that culture of psychological safety where people feel as though it's okay to make a mistake, because it's tough, right? Like you can even do the work on yourself to say, "Hey, I can give myself grace if I make a mistake." But if you're in an environment where it is so you're shamed for making
yeah,
a mistake, then I think the appropriate thing to do is to leave that environment.
yeah, yeah, because it's only going to weigh on you, and
Yeah,
it's going to only dim your light, dim your innovation, your creation, right? It's
yeah.
only going to dim those things, those good parts of you, and that's not good.
Well, yeah, and it's like, is it? There's no paycheck that's worth that, in my opinion. Like I don't, I can't imagine. I've been out of corporate for many years, but I could never imagine going into an environment where I don't feel safe, and then saying, "Well, the money's worth it." Right? Like I could never imagine that. Like, and for anyone listening, right? If you genuinely don't feel safe, I mean,
Yeah,
you've done the work on you. So first check yourself, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
because a lot of times people say that, oh, it's anxious and all that, and then when I coach them through it, it's more about their own mindset and how they're dealing with it that needs to be
mhm,
addressed. We have to start there. But if you've done that work and you know it's not you, you've given yourself grace, you're kind to yourself, you're not hard on yourself. But every time you make a mistake, someone's coming down on you. Please
yeah,
leave that environment.
yeah,
Please
yeah.
make it a priority to find something better.
Because if you don't, you will become that environment. You will become that leadership, that management that you so did not like. you will automatically become it. Like, and I've seen that. There was a organization I was working with, and that was the culture. The culture said you were supposed to continuously yell at employees until they do what you say to do.
Wow.
That was the culture. Now they didn't say that was the culture, but that's what people were they were in.
Yeah.
And that was not the and I said, so how's that leadership style working for you right now? And they
Yeah.
said that's why I'm here with you, Kenston. That's why I'm
Well,
here with you.
I'd love
Like,
to for you to talk a little bit about the contrast to that, because I do think knowing what good looks like is helpful. Like knowing what good culture looks like, and I know that you've had this opportunity to work with cultures where there was a lot of problems, but you've also, I think, either helped to contribute towards good culture as well as then see the finished product. So, what does that look like? Like for people who are listening, be like, oh God, I've been stuck in a place where I don't feel good at all. What's on the other side? What should people be looking for in high quality culture?
like you said, a safe workplace, meaning that as I'm on the way to creating something or innovating something for my job, I am able to still make mistakes and not be scrutinized for it. I'm still able to, um, you know, I in a creative or a healthy workplace, it's open communication. I'm being able to say things without fear of uh again retaliation. I'm able to, they were saying for a while, bring in my whole self to workplace, whatever that means, but in a respectful, empathetic, mature way. I'm walking into an environment that is respectful, empathetic, mature, in a curious environment. And so curiosity is saying I'm able to ask questions when I don't understand. There's I understand there's some organizations that if you ask them a question, they think you are questioning their whatever, their authority. And that's not all the case. But in a healthy environment, they take that as, oh, you're vested. You're really vested in this organization. So yes, I do expect questions coming from you, right? And so that could be the difference maker. And just, you know, those are my words: respect, empathy, maturity, and curiosity. If those are
Yeah,
infused into the culture, great things can happen. And
yeah,
what we deem as uncomfortable conversations, we got to change that language to say necessary conversations. you know when you change that language, it says I'm open to having this conversation versus I'm going to be closed because I don't know what's going to happen. Now,
yeah,
granted, you don't know what's going to happen in a necessary conversation. However, you're thinking around it, it becomes more open. Just simple as, you got to give feedback to an employee because of a behavior, a negative behavior. Well, don't deem that as a uncomfortable conversation. Deem it as a necessary conversation that you'll be more creative in your thought process to be able to work through it. But that's creating that environment that you would want to be in, like the environment that you would want to thrive or that you would thrive in. And that just takes a collective group of people. Again, even if it's not organization wide, but if you're in your department and you want this healthy, thriving, belonging culture, you have to just sit down, take the time, and dream it, write it down, and then go after it.
I love it. I love it because otherwise it's going to be like Animal Farm, right? You remember the story Animal Farm? I remember reading it from like elementary school, where all the animals they revolt against the leadership, right? And then they become just like the leaders. They become just like the humans, right? And they do exactly what they were doing. And we have to have the kind of people that are willing to dream, the way you said, and willing to have those necessary conversations. And we need leaders to be able to get out of their comfort zones and do things differently. And you mentioned curiosity, and so I wanted to ask you. I like to do this towards the end of our conversations, Kenston, which is imagine Selena is joins one of your talks. Let's say she's at an HR event, a conference. She hears you and she's inspired by your message. After you get off the stage, she comes up to you and she tells you her story. She gives you kind of the full download of what she's going through, and you listen. You listen with empathy. You acknowledge her, like I know you would. Now, I know you wouldn't just go ahead and vomit advice. You may bring a question to her mind, something to help her to be able to work through this. What would be what would you ask Selena? What would you ask her?
Yeah, so I would ask Selena in this case is what could she do to, or how could she be curious in the moments where self-doubt creeps in?
Hmm.
And what questions, and really saying, Selena, how can you be curious? What questions can you ask yourself to get through moments of discouragement, moments of self-doubt, moments of fear, and fear of the unknown, fear of, I would call it, false evidence appearing real, because in her case, hasn't taken any action yet. What questions could you ask yourself to help walk you through the journey to get to the action? Because
Hmm.
we're not staying here, Selena. I'm gonna tell you right now, with Selena, we're not staying here. So, what questions can you ask yourself that will lead you along the way to make sure you're taking those intentional, necessary steps to get where you desire to be?
Yeah.
Because you said, Selena, I know, you said you desire to be the most amazing, incredible leader in the world. Well, in order to do that, you got to follow these steps. You got to take these steps and really get curious on what is in your way, what barriers, and then what are the potential solutions, and then take steps on those.
I love it. I love it. What a good coaching question to be able to ask, to put it onto the other person in a very respectful, but also in a way that empowers them, right? To empower somebody to be able to say, what do you need to ask yourself in those moments? And then what I often think happens in those instances is we interrupt a pattern. There's a pattern that you're going down, but then you bring in a question. It creates a new pattern, a new neural network gets made in the brain where you now look at it from a different perspective. So I love it. And by the way, Kenston, you shared with me earlier the best way to reach you, and for everyone listening, I really recommend you check out his website where you can find a lot more about Kenston. It's livewithlife.com, and that's spelled this way: livewithlife.com. And that's where I learned so much about you, because your website's
Yeah,
phenomenal, looks great. And then
thank
you
you.
also have a lot about your speaking as well as your coaching on there as well, and all the social media platforms that you're on people can find from livewithlife.com. So Kenston, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day. This was such
Absolutely.
a fun conversation. I think that we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and would love to have you again on in the future, my friend.
Awesome. I will be honored. Thank you for having me, man.
You got to appreciate how honest and direct Kenston was on what it takes to change workplace culture. And you could tell he's been around a lot of different cultures, has the experience, and I think what he shared was incredibly helpful. And I'm going to do my best to synthesize it down to our 3 insights and our 3 actionable takeaways. The first insight: culture starts with the leader. And oftentimes it starts with leading yourself first. Leaders are the one that create a great culture, that drive performance and get results. And what we have to be mindful of is, are we in a culture that is conducive to learning and development? And if we are not, then we have to have the courage to leave. Second insight: I like how he termed this the game changer mindset. Now I'm going to read his definition word for word because I think it was powerful. Someone who significantly impacts a situation or a circumstance and raises the level of skill and awareness in the people around them. That's a game changer, a difference maker, someone who's resilient, someone who sees obstacles as opportunities. And when you are tapping into this mindset, you don't need to have all the answers. You have to be able to forgive yourself if you make mistakes, to have that kind of grace, and also to feel safe within yourself in challenging environments. Third insight: I like the shift he recommended making from uncomfortable conversations to necessary conversations. Being aware of the fact that some conversations need to be had, if such as biases like we were talking about. And it requires courage to be able to have those necessary conversations. Our actionable takeaways. First one: reflect on your past wins. Imposter syndrome creeps in when we are not being intentional about this kind of reflection. You've achieved a great deal. You've had a lot of wins, but you're often forgetting about them. So I encourage you to encourage yourself. Reflect on those past wins and be sure that you're celebrating them and reminding yourself of what you've already achieved. Second actionable takeaway: don't tell me, show me. When we want to enact change, we have to be able to show others, ask great questions, showcase results. And I love how he talked about knowing how your leader likes to receive information. Don't assume they want to receive it the way you would. Know who it is that you're speaking with, know your audience, and share the message in a way that will be relatable to them. Third actionable takeaway: how can you be curious when self-doubt creeps in? I love how at the end, he said, what questions would you ask yourself, Selena? And I encourage you to think of it the same way. When that self-doubt creeps in within you, what do you need to ask yourself in those moments to shift your pattern and to step back into your power? Join us on Friday. I'm going to dive deeper into what are the natural programs that are running within us that lead us to thinking more negative thoughts, falling into the imposter syndrome, and learning how do we override those programs. What are some actionable strategies that you can put into practice that will allow for you to be more proactive in shifting your thought patterns away from I'm a fraud, I'm no good, I'm an imposter, into having the kind of confidence that you need to have, as well as having the courage to advocate for your ideas in these high demand environments. I will see you on Friday, of course, through the podcast platform of your choice. I always struggle when I say that at the end of this episode. I hope you realize it's not the first time I said podcast platform. I have to come up with a better term. If someone has one, email it to me. But I will see you on Friday, not on YouTube, but you'll hear me on one of those platforms. And until next time, thank you so much for listening.